Chapter 19. Installations. Dave. Dave's shoulder was throbbing with heat by the time the Mayleedian suspension vehicle started its descent. Even wearing a high-tech blindfold, he knew they were descending. But one thing he didn't know was where on planet Arceus housed the Mayleedian secret headquarters. The hum of the vehicle lost power when it stabilized, and the only noises he was aware of were the agents breathing around him. When their vibrations ceased, a guard untied his blindfold. An archway opened in the side of the suspension vehicle, like a bubble popping in water. Bloody hellfire! What is this technology? You'll be answering our questions, the navy blue man beside him said. You're still a public enemy. But the Marine commander said I could join you. I said there was the possibility, Finley said. The girl with braids leapt from the suspension craft and into a warehouse. The fennec giant followed before pivoting around and offering Dave his hand. After accepting it, the once terrorist followed him into the hangar. He peeked at the vehicle they'd flown in. The visibility had yet to be activated. Chonglin and Finley lowered themselves out, and it seemed as if they were entering some magical doorway into the world. Other unusual vehicles lined the edges of the cavern, all coloured black. They ranged in size, yet all resembled streamlined fish. Dave sucked in a quick breath. I ain't ever seen the likes of these. You're a communist. Finley adjusted his corn-coloured top knot. Not anymore, I ain't. Dave offered him a cheeky smile. And I might just delete that a little bit. Finley mumbled and gestured for Dave to follow him and the other four, leaving the lavender-skinned pilot to go in a different direction. The dark blue giant with Indigo's eyes gripped onto Dave's cuffed hands and nudged him through a doorway and down a passageway. They entered the fourth door on the right. In the centre of the hall, Mayleedians stood inside or outside orbs of colourful light. Some sprawled in unusual transparent chairs, tapping away at the air, while others floated above metal discs in VR. The technology reminded Dave of those incredible tree people in the cave, surrounded by multi-level glass structure. When Zarita had taken him through that ginormous place, she'd refused to explain what and who they were. Those weirdos had been using technology like the Mayleedians too. A shiver ran up and down his spine. Were they friends with the Mayleedians? What other secrets had his friend Zarita kept from him? A 6-foot-tall woman with twinkling orange skin and waist-length golden hair waved at them from the corner of the room. She didn't wear a clinging all-in-one like the others, but flowing white robes of the lightest fabric. A cord of gold clinched her narrow waist. His jaw dropped until she swaggered over to the group. Despite her femininity, her mannerisms were like a man's. With a strong sense of awareness of his heartbeat, Dave mirrored her body language, hands on hips and feet planted wide. She scanned him up and down. A terrorist turned hero. Her orange lips curled up at the corners. Pleased to meet you. She pressed her hands together at her heart and bowed her golden head. So you gonna torture me for my evil deeds or offer me a medal? Neither. Her pale yellow forehead puckered at the blue giant behind him. This is the head of intelligence, the man said. She nodded and heaved a sigh. Feet still anchored firmly apart. Commander Finley told headquarters you desire to work against the communists now. That's right. I might have some useful information. I doubt it. But are you prepared to risk your life to free more victims of war? He stared into her reflective amber eyes with golden speckles. That I am. And are you willing to have cyborg accessories inserted into your limbs and brain? His muscles numbed as he folded his arms across his stomach. Like Commander Finley? She nodded. Most definitely. So you're prepared to have your 4 limbs amputated? What? Finley sniggered. Did you assume I had meat hands which could morph into weapons? The teenager commander stared at him with those blue eyes. Shite! Bile burned in the back of his throat. That sounds harsh. It's the only way you can become a cyborg, Finley said. And if I refuse? The head of intelligence tossed her golden locks. You still have the opportunity to risk your life rescuing victims of war. That's what I want. Being cybernetically enhanced will improve your success rate and protect you. Only cyborgs have the chance to wear stealth, for example. I'm not sure I fancy my limbs being amputated. Is that your choice? Can't I have the tech without the chop? Pilot one of those invisible crafts? Why chop off me limbs to become invisible? This is the last time I'll tell you. Only cyborg marines have stealth tech. It's incredibly expensive and we can't afford to lose it to our opponents. If they heist our technology, their scientists and engineers might mimic the material. Finley plunked both hands on his hips. That's the last thing we want. Yep. Dave picked a boil on his cheek. It popped, sending pus dripping off his fingertips. The beautiful head of intelligence wrinkled her nose momentarily. I've got a good friend. Frankie's face with his new eye patch morphed into Dave's mind. He's like a son I never had. I must find him. He could be in danger. I already told you Frankie's with someone who should protect him well enough, Finley said. Well, it ain't enough for me. The head of intelligence said, Do you desire to search for your friend? I do. To do that, you must become a cyborg. Can I go searching for him on me own and then join you folk later and help you out then? I ain't too keen on amputation. No, you could change allegiance again. We'd prefer to imprison you. How can I rescue more captives as a mere human? She placed a hand in the centre of his chest because we know you're telling the truth and that you are ready to risk your life for them. Become a cyborg. Just going to delete a tiny bit there. If I become a cyborg, can I search for him then? Even better, we can assign a partner to help you with your search. You'll have stealth hoverboards, the works. Her eyes glinted amber like a desert cat's. His stomach roiled. When will you amputate me limbs? Oshun. Detective Irini ordered Officer Charlie to unstrap Oshun. Oshun pulled off her orange gloves to reveal her metal hands. I'm a cyborg. Put those back on. With a panicked expression, the detective made a command into her wristwatch. This is Detective Irini here. Stations control, hearing you loud and clear. A voice rang out from her accessory. I am taking Henrietta Esteve to go into witness protection on terra firma now. Hearing you loud and clear, Oshun worried about the 3 teenage Marines. Could Ren be a threat to them? But she wanted out, and Irini seemed to be her ticket away from danger. They floated 3 modules along. Ren waited beside the airlock on the edge of that particular module. What are you doing? He asked. We're taking our witness into protection. It's nothing to concern yourself about. The station and her father have been informed. Oshun clenched her jaw so hard her face ached. Is the communist scientist working for the Marines? It was all too messed up. But what about the people, your question? Ren's eyes were feverish and overbright. Officer Charlie placed a hand on Ren's shoulder and winked. Another detective will come to do that. Oshun winced as the 2 men shared a look. A distorted hum reverberated in her ear. We have authority over this space station, Irini nodded. Do you have any belongings, Henrietta? They got blown up with the labs. Oshun pressed a hand against the tube of growth inhibitors she'd taken with her on her spacewalk, relieved she hadn't lost them. Detective Irini nodded towards the airlock, then stared at Ren. Would you be so kind to let us through? He hovered into the other module. He floated into the other module, concern pasted across his face. From the corner of Oshun's eyes, Officer Charlie nodded at him, causing Ren's shoulders to relax and hers to tense. They floated into the airlock and waited for it to fasten. After the second partitioning swiveled open, she stepped into a small spaceship. Relief flooded Oshun at the most taken-for-granted sensation, gravity. Her machine and human assemblages cried out for joy at no longer floating. Detective Irini gestured for Oshun to sit. The detective perched beside Officer Charlie in the pilot seat and the other guy collapsed into his chair across the aisle. The spacecraft detached from the International Space Station with a click and sped them away. "Do you work for the Mayleedians?" Oshun asked the woman. "Yes." "Where are you taking me now?" "To an asylum." Her skin prickled. "Your protection is my number one priority." Detective Arini hinged around to face Oshun while Officer Charlie played with the graphic controls which floated above the sleek black glass panels. "Professor Estev has no daughter. He never did. Who are you?" Oshun said, "I need to talk in private, without the others listening." "They're my partners. Your secret is safe with them." "It's a womanly thing." She feigned embarrassment as she imagined the growth inhibitors she was taking. She couldn't falsify outright should there be a lie detector. "Don't mind me." The shorter guy opened an orb around him and the word private flashed in red across the outside. "Hey," Officer Charlie pivoted around in the cockpit and shrugged. "I have daughters, but you're not a woman," Oshun said. "Activate privacy on your airsphere this instant," Arini told him. Oshun made sure her telepathy device was off and whispered quickly, "I'm a cyborg and so is Agent Wren. I think he blew the plant biology department and Officer Charlie is in it too." Detective Arini's face remained neutral as she fiddled with her wristwatch. "Is that what you theorize?" "Yes." I'm just going to change the bit where she says I'm a cyborg because she's already shown them her metal hands. Sorry, I hope you don't mind. "That guy called Wren is a cyborg too. I think he blew the plant biology department and Officer Charlie is in on it." Detective Arini's face remained neutral as she fiddled with her wristwatch. "Is that what you theorize?" "Yes." I'm affirming, not questioning. I have a lie detector. "How long have you known him?" Oshun nodded in Officer Charlie's direction. 2 hours. Arini's head wrinkled. "Will you let me knock him out with a dart?" Oshun asked. "If you trust me, do it now." Nerves raw, Oshun pumped her stomach 8 times, feeling the dart and cartridge regurgitate up her esophagus. She eyed Arini before aiming at the man's beefy nape. Thwam! His head flopped and the craft swerved. Oshun's heart skipped a beat. Arini undid her inertia belt and thrust him off the pilot seat. Click. Cold metal pressed against Oshun's temple. She swallowed and peered up at the other police officer. "Activate front thrust." He said. "It's okay," Arina said. "It's a precaution we had to take." "I get that, but Charlie's not the only mole." "Don't kill me." Oshun remembered the fentanyl airborne gas she could excrete to render enemies unconscious. It could also kill. Thrusters activated. Detective Arini's chin trembled as she fiddled with holograms. "What are you going to do?" "Have some friends pick this girl up." "But what about me?" "Take you along for the ride." Oshun flinched. Without a doubt he'd kill Arini. She tapped a rhythm with her right incisor teeth, and the gas hissed out of her palms. As soon as both police crumpled to the ground, she released her harness and sat in the pilot seat. Inertia belts automatically fastened around her torso as she viewed the top of the range Mayleedian control panels, sheer black and without buttons or levers. The smooth surfaces lay under levitating holographic navigation diagrams and star charts. A vessel came up on her radar. She rotated the vehicle while searching for weapons the craft might possess. None. She rotated the craft by using weak thrusters, then activated the most powerful rear thruster and propelled the vessel towards the planet ahead. Her stomach lurched. She activated a right thruster for a few seconds and reared off and away. The craft was travelling faster than she had imagined. She viewed the 3 unconscious police. Officer Charlie stirred, so she shot out of her seat and crouched beside him. If the other mole was a cyborg too, she'd be risking her life by keeping him alive. She stood, swallowed, and slipped off her right glove. It felt good to morph her hand into a vaporizing laser pistol again. It sent a surge of energy through her veins and into her human heart. If only Wren was here to finish as well. This would be the first time she killed somebody intentionally. She held her breath and pulled the trigger. When she thought of a wife and children waiting for him, she shifted towards the shorter man and gulped. But it couldn't be helped. It was her life or his. She vaporized him too. Agent Haru. Charlie? Agent Haru said in his mind while squeezing sweet potato paste into his mouth. The double op didn't reply. Jefferson? Nothing. Haru growled and swiped both hands through his hair. What's wrong, man? Richard asked from the computer in the module beyond. I've got to go to terra firma. What? Why? More IT training with Mayleedians. How you going to get there? Sissia was dead, so he couldn't ask to use that craft. It was gone too. He couldn't use Jadan and Maze. They'd also been blown up, which was kind of good for him and kind of bad. He gritted his teeth. Oshun, can you hear me? Nothing. Could she hear him? Was she blocking his signal? How about Charlie and Jefferson? Were they going to double-cross Haru and take her memory chip for themselves? He blew out a pent-up breath. He'd have to wait it out, at least for a few hours. Let them go to the planet first. Chapter 20. Robot Plasma. Oshun and Detective Irini. Oshun navigated the craft through Artheus's atmosphere. The roar against the outer walls indicated their vessel had ignited. She had landed a craft like this only once, and that had been in a VR game. Was this her time to die? Bile burned the back of her throat, and she glanced over her shoulder at the unconscious detective and empty seats Oshun's murder victims had sat in. The craft shuddered as it entered differing air columns and currents. Next, it glided over an arid desert. Oshun solved how to set the landing mode on autopilot. The detective moaned, so Oshun helped her into a seat and strapped her in. Beads of sweat plastered the woman's albino skin. Where's Officer Charlie? I killed him. And Officer Kevin too? She was really growing numb to all this death. Yes. The woman's small yellow eyes widened as she watched Oshun's hand morph into a laser pistol and back into a metal hand with moving joints. What happened to you? Where'd you get Mayleedian cybernetics like that? You truly work for the Mayleedians? Yes. The Mayleedian Interstellar Police employed me. Irini gaped at the land through the view screen. It was approaching fast. I guess it's too late for me to help. Oshun clutched the edges of her pilot seat as the craft bounced and skidded on a cushion of air between its base and the arid ground. When it ceased movement, Oshun felt a strong awareness of her surroundings. Her gut instinct told her Irini was a good person. The detective stood and hauled a rucksack on her back. Oshun followed her down a black glass ramp with a rough upper surface to prevent slipping. Is it safe to go outside? I hope so. Where are we? Irini fiddled with her wristwatch. Damn, what is it? We're miles from headquarters. The woman frowned down at her. What's a kid so young doing with a cyborg hand? Oshun wouldn't admit her 4 entire limbs were weaponized with the best military cybernetics in the 7 solar systems, just in case she was wrong about her gut instinct. But your agents were moles. Irini sat in the sand, squinting in the lights of the blazing red dwarf. Menidian eyes were more sensitive than Renidians. Oshun sat beside her and peered at the smoking vehicle. Will it blow? No, but it's best we get it hidden. Can't we fly it to wherever we're going? We need stealth to go to the secret location. And I don't know it anyway. How can we hide it? There are no trees or anything. I'll call headquarters and get help. But first, tell me your story. How did a 12-year-old pose as the daughter of a Dawn Republic scientist while possessing the most expensive Mayleedian cyborg hands? Oshun reflected on all the people she had met since Mother had died. Some hid behind masks. Some said she was fighting on the right side. But who could she truly trust? Were those VR games even real? First, I'll tell you I'm not the daughter of a communist scientist. I never knew my father. My mother died. I'm from planet Nerthus. Oshun could see the sympathy in the detective's eyes as she told her story. Irini's fingers fidgeted and her mouth grimaced as the child told her what she had discovered about the space slug massacre. More than 100 teenagers died. With a tight heart, Oshun sprung to her mechanical feet and peered all around. The scrubland appeared yellow when her eyes adjusted to infrared. They would have been even if she wasn't a cyborg, because this was where her ancestors were from. Okay, that needs a bit of changing. I start that paragraph again. More than 100 teenagers died. With a tight heart, Oshun sprung to her mechanical feet and peered all around. The scrubland was yellow. Even if she wasn't a cyborg, she could see a spectrum of colours within the infrared because her ancestors were from Arceus. Unlike the native Mayleedians, she could somehow see in the white sun spectrum too, and didn't require protective suction lenses for that. Despite finally setting foot on her ancestors' world, she couldn't have felt lonelier. Since Mum had died, she only cried a few times. Even when she accidentally killed that boy in the army barracks at Durbar, she didn't cry. She'd felt pain, guilt, grief and disgust, but the only time she shed a tear was when Professor Kelly told her about her emotional trauma as a child when her own mother committed suicide and took her dad along with her. But Oshun's love for the particle wrangler had transformed into hatred. Kelly witnessed those atrocities for many years, and when something could have been done, she had accepted the murders and continued. Oshun sat on the parched ground again and told the detective about what Kelly had said, but Irini kept a neutral expression. Don't utter a word of this space slug theory when we arrive at the Mayleedian headquarters, the detective said. This remains confidential between the two of us while I try to gather evidence towards your accusations. Do you have a memory chip? Yes, even worse. How can it be worse? Can't a brain surgeon withdraw the information directly from that? The detective sniggered, but it had an edge to it. She glared at the child with overbright eyes. Extracting your memory chip would kill you. So I shouldn't even tell my friend, Commander Finley, especially not him. He's a Nerthling. Not all Nerthlings are bad. But do you know which ones are good? No. Exactly. There must be more double agents than you know. Perhaps the whole of the Imperial Majesty, the King's Mayleedian Interstellar Military is corrupt. Perhaps the whole of the Nerthling military is. I wouldn't be surprised. We're not that bad. Breathless, Oshun rubbed sweaty hands on her clothes. Of course not. Don't trust anyone but me. You hear? It might be slow, but I'll try my best to sort this out. I won't give up on taking these Nerthlings to court. You should have never been on the ship. Oshun leaned in. Perhaps we can bring the teenage victims to justice? I hope so. And perhaps we can bring you to justice too. I'll be questioning you further, and possibly some other trusted police detectives, but only open up when I'm with you and say it's okay. They'll all want to know what a 12-year-old is doing as a cyborg. That will be something Admiral Marsh will have to answer, or someone of higher rank in the Nerthling Military's Durbar division. You'll really help me? She nodded. We'll build a court case once I've gathered enough evidence on the betrayal. Plucking the truth from this web of deceit could be slow going. That man, Wren, will need to be identified, as will Officer Charlie and Officer Kevin's associates. Are you going to contact them now? Oshun was willing to believe everything would turn out all right. Was she ignorant listening to her intuition? It seemed as if Detective Irini was her guardian angel. If the case went to court and they won, that would be great. Stand. Irini swiped the air with her arm, causing a black air sphere to unfold. The woman and girl stepped inside, and Oshun waited as the detective went through security checks. The detective hopped up and down, and she communicated with Agent Marsh. Why didn't you tell me there are agents up there? It was a covert operation. It doesn't make sense. You must have known the kids were in danger. Being a black op is dangerous. Then why a 12-year-old child? That is confidential information between ranking officers. After they arranged for a manual suspension vehicle to collect them, Irini moaned. Oh, I need to take a dump so badly. Is there a toilet on the craft? Unfortunately not. Oshun giggled. It was the first time she had laughed for a long time. I'm toilet shy. Irini jabbed a thumb over her shoulder. I'm heading over there to the shrubs. Don't want to leave a pile of it near the craft for when the agents collect us. That would be plain embarrassing. She frowned at Oshun. You good with that? Oshun smirked and made her arm morph into a laser cannon. Come on, what have those commies got against me? Wow. Irini's eyes went round. Watch it with that thing. Oshun hooted as the detective scampered away. She clicked her front teeth and visualised her metal arm again. The sun felt warm on its surface. It wasn't the most fertile habitat on Arceus, but it sure felt good to breathe deeply through her nose, a natural atmosphere. She felt lighter too. She jumped higher than usual, unsure whether it was her cyborg legs or the weaker gravity. Detective Irini was one of those kinds of people who took forever to poo. Oshun was getting bored until something on the horizon caught her attention. She stood. It must have been big because the horizon was far and the fact she could see it meant it was large. She shuffled on the dusty ground and narrowed her eyes. Then remembered she could activate zoom vision by pulling on her outer eyelashes in a slow rhythm. The more repetition she tugged on those lashes, the closer she focused. First, she focused too much, and it was all brown. She pulled her inner top lashes with the same rhythm, in the same rhythm, and her eyesight settled on the tanks. No worries. If they were communists and came that way, she could laser cannon them. She tilted her head to the side. They weren't tanks. It was one thing, and it had a face. Its gait was like that of a stiff giant, a metal giant. He must have been an enormous giant to appear that size, a kilometre away. She did a rough calculation via the monitors in her brain-to-computer interface, 112 metres tall. Oshun gasped to control her breath. Irini! The woman didn't hear her. She pulled her eyelashes to gain normal vision. But nothing happened. Jerking her head in Irini's direction didn't help. The ground and shrubs were a blur. She delayed her running by staring into the horizon. The thing had power jets under its feet and was levitating at an incredible speed towards them. Blindly, she sprinted. Irini! An unseen boulder caused her to trip and fall flat on her face. Even the robot was a blur now, as he had appeared too near for her to get her vision sorted. It was too late to activate her hearing protection too. Crackle, boom! Her hearing became muffled by the explosions, and she felt the impact of metal plummeting through the air and crashing. Oh no, not yet. I changed that a little bit. Her hearing became muffled by the explosions, and she felt the air vibrate as plasma burned it. The stink it caused was similar to VR, but stronger. It singed her nostrils, and the heat forced her to cover her head and face with her metal arms and hands. The sky was a grey fuzz against the white flashing before each explosion. She lay on the dune, clutching the sides of her head. Irini! Berating thoughts plagued her as she activated her military-grade aura shield. Commander Finley wouldn't be happy with her. Detective Irini! She had little time. She detached her right leg. I'm going to just delete that bit about Commander Finley. Sorry. She had little time. She detached her right leg and did exactly what the hologram of the female cyborg had done when Oshun first awoke limbless on the spaceship in the spaceship's surgery. Although she couldn't see the robot, the dark tone of the sky indicated where he was. She couldn't even aim, but pointed and discharged plasma. Roar! Crash! It must have plunged to the ground. Boom! Although she couldn't see, it was obvious metal was plummeting through the air and crashing all around her. I'm going to actually just pop that here. Sorry, move it up a bit. Yeah. There was an explosion. The heat burned her face. Don't need to say there was an explosion. Boom is obviously an explosion. But she was alive and she could run, still blinded, but able to perceive the patches of shrubs. Oshun sprinted. Here, Oshun! I'm here. Irini's weak voice caught Oshun's attention, even though everything was muffled and her ears were ringing. She followed the woman's whimpers and dropped to her knees. She rummaged around. I'm blinded. When Oshun's fingers skimmed what felt like a torso, her hands came away wet. Detective, can you hear me? Nothing. Oshun's fingers tiptoed across to the detective's ribcage, and her stomach heaved when she felt bones jutting out and blood pumping from a wound. She sobbed. Commander Finley, can you hear me? We've been blitzed. Detective Irini's badly injured. Oshun? Where are you? I thought you were coming for me. Huh? Admiral Marsh said you were. I'll find her now. She told me nothing. I thought you were at the space station. No. I'm in some hot and arid place. They're sending a sussman. But we were assaulted by a giant hovering robot. I shot it with PPP-15 from my leg and it's destroyed. Are you serious? Yes, it's okay. I found the Admiral. We're coming for you now. You have your medical training. Are you injured too? No, Irini is. She might die. Bind her wound, Oshun. Check her breathing. You are a trained Marine. We're coming for you now, Oshun Musa. I'm trying, but I cannot see. I zoomed in to see the robot and couldn't zoom out again. Though I managed the first time Maybe there's a short circuit in your visual cortex system. The detective, she stopped responding. Just do what you can to rescue her. There's an open wound in her chest. Her ribs are broken. She's unconscious. Still breathing? Definitely. Her ribcage is rising and falling quickly. You must bind the wound. Use your cleanest garments. Okay. Can you stay with me? Of course. The child Marine had little choice but to save the detective's life. She had ended a few lives already. Now it was time to save one. She kicked off her boiler suit, which had already been unzipped and draping from her waist. Oh no. Actually, she used her leg, didn't she? So I'll change that a little bit. Here we go. She kicked off her boiler suit, which had already been unzipped, draping from her waist and completely torn up the leg she had detached to use as a cannon. After activating extra sensitivity in her hands' nerve endings, she felt around carefully, building an image in her mind's eye of the injuries. She put the detective in recovery position and bound her wounds with strips of her boiler suit, pressing hard at the puncture sites. Oshun's bladder loosened when she felt several more sites of puncture. Detective Irini's breathing ceased. Holding her own breath, Oshun tried to resuscitate her. With a chest that was completely wounded, she didn't know how she could do that. Even though doing chest compressions on an already broken rib cage and possibly punctured lung might cause more damage, that was her only option. When Finley and the Marine showed up, they loaded the detective into the craft and helped Oshun find a place to rest. She still couldn't see, but she had activated some medical software which provided her an audio update on Irina's vitals and knew her life was hanging on a thread. I'm not sure if she'll live, Finley said. Oshun sniffed and rubbed her blind eyes. She wanted to tell him about the space slugs and how Irini had promised to search for evidence and take the Durbornese division to court, but the detective had also ordered her not to tell Finley, especially since he was a Nerthling of high rank. She tried to hold in her sobs as the military vessel escorted them to wherever the secret headquarters might be. She had trained to be a cyborg Marine for so long and shouldn't show her weakness to others. The detective is going into cardiac arrest, one of them said. Operate the defibrillator. Sorry, the defibrillator, sorry. Ordered another. After some time, someone said, it's no use, the detective's heart hasn't pumped for 10 minutes now. Call it a day, another asked. A scream sliced through the fog in Oshun's brain. Save her, please! She was so kind to me. Only now did she wish to know if Irini had a family of her own. She'd certainly shown Oshun motherly care. I'm sorry, we tried our best. It's my fault. I should have. It's not your fault, Finley snapped. You never sent that robot. It's President Isleworth's fault. She stomped her feet and howled until anger transformed to grief. Everyone I touch dies. Chapter 21. Too innovative. President Isleworth. President, Dondor said. Isleworth twisted around, noticing his major's face was pale beneath his bandaged head. Don't just linger in the doorway. He entered and dropped into an armchair. What went wrong? The robot I sent to fetch my daughter, it's been destroyed. Destroyed? How can that be so? Those machines are stronger than tanks. Their defences are superb. I have footage of exactly what happened. Want to watch? Go on. A headache set in. Since Dondor's daughter had come on the scene, his plans had disintegrated. If it wasn't for her, he could have destroyed the space station and let everyone believe his enemy was the culprit. Dondor slipped a video cassette out of his jacket pocket and slid it into the device under the television screen. The image was black and white, but it was clear. There was a resemblance between Dondor and that girl in the desert. She had the same square jaw and a determined look on her brow. She struggled as she tried to get a target on the robot. Isleworth grimaced. Is she blind? She appears to be, but she knew the robot was there. She detected it all right. And that woman, the detective, I'm not sure if she survived. There was someone taking a dump in the bushes. He paused the video and pointed. See? Isleworth noted the woman's albino colouring and gritted his teeth. A Mayleedian? Ancestors native to Arceus? Employed by the Mayleedians? Now watch. I don't need to say about the ancestor stuff. People should know this by now, yeah. A Mayleedian? Employed by the Mayleedians? Now watch. The girl took off her leg and transformed it into a futuristic cannon before firing bright plasma. The screen went dark. Light-headed, Isleworth unbuttoned his collar and tugged it. She destroyed it, Dondor said. Did you see what she did to her body? Can you imagine us having a cyborg like that? What weaponry was it? It's called a PPP-15, and what does it mean? It is the 15th design of a polarized photon phaser. And did all the other 14 designs reshape like that? All polar photon phasers apply to Cyborg. It's new Mayleedian weaponry. It wasn't just a gun, it was her whole leg. Can her hands and arms reshape? Afraid so. Agent Haru, my double agent at the space station, explained the technology to me. That girl's leg and foot will become a normal limb again? Exactly. All that is needed is intention and the knowledge of how to activate such metamorphosis. She destroyed my robot, Isleworth jeered. It cost me a lot for you to buy me that, and I never asked for it. I know, I'm sorry. Dondor lowered his chin and let his shoulders sag. I cannot keep protecting your daughter. It seems you don't need to. The Mayleedians have her now. Heat flushed through his body. She has unclassified information about what the Shepherd Station plant biologists were studying. Can you communicate with her through that new telepathy gadget in your brain? The girl whose wetware I possess was not programmed to communicate with Oshun Musa, so no. Who can you communicate with? Only Agent Haru, so they'd been programmed that way. They had worked together before the Mayleedians imprisoned him for murdering his wife and a high-ranking officer she'd been sleeping with. You must stop seeking your daughter. You hear me? She's an enemy bastard. You don't care about her. Find out from that wife murderer where the hell these Mayleedians are hiding. I hate to tell you this, President. Sorry, I just changed a little bit because that paragraph was really, disconcerting. I couldn't understand it really, so let's try this one instead. The dead cyborg I got this telepathy device from had worked with Agent Haru before he was imprisoned and escaped. You must stop seeking your daughter. You hear me? She's an enemy bastard. You don't care about her. Find out from that wife murderer where the hell these Mayleedians are hiding. Let's change that to find out from that wife murdering agent of yours where the hell these Mayleedians are hiding. I hate to tell you this, President, but Agent Haru cannot share that information. How about the mole you said you were friends with, Admiral Marsh, is she not? That's right, she cannot give us the location of the headquarters either. No one but the highest ranking officers know. I'd say Admiral was a high rank. Not high enough. That's not what I wish to hear. I'm your closest friend. I wouldn't deceive you. We must launch some nuclear warheads then. If I can't conquer the Mayleedians, I can conquer the world. Frankie. Through dripping woodlands, Frankie, Olio and Ogwa followed the river. By twilight, the watercourse widened and they arrived at a village. It was horrible only being able to see with one eye. It made everything that happened that much worse. But Frankie bore no hatred towards Isa for blinding him. Unlike her, Frankie was forgiving. Tethered fishing boats bobbed on the water, while nets swayed from wooden beams in the freezing wind. Smoke rose from chimneys and the smell of fried bacon wafted in the air. Frankie's stomach whined. Ogwa twisted his head around when they passed an inn with music blaring from within. He pivoted on his heel and tugged Frankie by the collar before unlocking his handcuffs. Now, just because I'm taking these off doesn't mean you can escape. You hear? Do you even have money to spend? Aye. Ogwa kept Olio bundled in his jacket and shouldered the door open. Hinges screeched in protest. Frankie's muscles relaxed in the warmth. 3 men stood on a small stage, one with a fiddle, one a bongo, and the other with a bass guitar. Frankie missed his guitar dearly. He hadn't played it for a long time, and Dave had left it in the communist base. The inn was a busy place and must have housed half the village, kids excluded. Frankie bobbed his head to the music. Only the present was important at the moment, even if he was sold to a slaver or murdered later. At the moment he knew what he craved most: food and water. A pretty young bar wench showed Frankie an I'm not going to call her bar wench, I'm going to call her server. A pretty young server showed Frankie and Ogwa to a cupboard under the stairs where they hung their furs and skins. She gasped when she saw Olio. Pets aren't allowed here. Her yellow eyes darted around the corridor. But it's cold outside, so he can wait in my room. She outstretched her hands. I'll bring him water and a snack when I find a minute. It's busy tonight. Frankie passed him over to her reluctantly, but she offered him a kind smile which eased some of Frankie's anxiety about the creature. Her skin was pale brown and her high ponytail like a cloud of black smoke which trailed down her back. Frankie thought she must be mixed race with such yellow eyes, which typically came from his albino Mayleedian race. She took the sparry cat upstairs and returned within a minute. He'll be fine. I gave him a rug to sleep on and it's warm up there. But how do you ever train a wild animal? I don't know, Frankie said. We've been friends since I was a small kid. You'll bring him food and drink? Ogwa asked. She nodded. Don't worry. Frankie swallowed as he watched her re-enter the crowded room, wide hips swaying under a narrow waist. At the bar, Ogwa bought him a warm cider spiced with cinnamon and nutmeg. Frankie was so thirsty he emptied the flask in one. Then Ogwa ordered baked bread and fish stew, accompanied with a jug of water and 2 more flasks of ale. Frankie had known hunger all his life, but since meeting Dave he had never gone a day without, except for now. So when the food caressed his tongue, gratitude flowed through his veins. He hooked his feet under the stool and gobbled up the stew, savouring the flavoursome chunks of soft fish. It warmed him through and through. Would Ogwa become kind, like Dave? He shook his head. This man was mean. Not that Dave wasn't, killing hundreds in his terrorist attacks, but Dave was only ever kind to Frankie, whereas Ogwa didn't have good intentions at all. He spoke for a long time in low tones with the man behind the bar. The barman's afro kept pivoting as he swerved his head around to eye Frankie. Frankie held his breath, considering escape. His hands were free. He'd already taken advantage of the situation and scratched the throbbing skin under his eye patch. He could feel the hoverboard against his groin in his underpants. I need the bog. Gotta take a dump. Ogwa raised his bushy eyebrows. I guess you need to escort me? I do indeed. The man's beard tickled Frankie's ear when he whispered, just 'cause you're not wearing your handcuffs don't mean you're a free man. The pretty young server from earlier showed them the way to the restrooms. They're outside. In only his thin underclothes, the cold soaked through Frankie's flesh and bones when they exited into a tiny courtyard littered with empty crates and a heap of bicycles. How could he escape in this freezing weather without his coats and over-trousers? Ogwa prodded Frankie into the foul-smelling shack and waited outside. A small lantern dangled in the corner. It sounded like there were monsters in the basement. He pivoted. What's that noise? Just pigs. Why are there pigs in here? They wolf your shit. What do you mean? He crouched over the hole in the planks of wood and maybe just planks. He crouched in over a hole in the planks and a snout poked up through it. It sounds as if they're eating each other too. How many are there under the floor? Just get it over with. I ain't got all night. Frankie almost slipped on something slimy when he stretched his legs. He extracted the square piece of metal, an alien material called Bilu glass, from the pocket of his underpants. But the shack only had one exit, where Ogwa waited. He stared up at the dark roof, but wooden beams and planks blocked his escape route. There might be tiles on top too. A woman hooted outside, followed by Ogwa's flirtatious words. With luck, Frankie could get out and up into the sky before the man noticed. He'd take his chance. Somehow the bubbly tone of the woman's voice relaxed his nerves and gave him courage. Silently, the device unfolded into a hoverboard with handlebars. He cringed when the door squeaked on its hinges, the hoverboard still hidden in the shadows. That was quick. Hurry now, it's freezing out here. After you. The man bellowed. After me. You go first. Will be pleased if I do. Frankie stepped back onto the hoverboard and zoomed towards that tiny patch of sky, but his shoulder slammed into the door frame. As he edged towards it at an awkward angle, the woman screamed. Not so soon. Ogwa yanked at his shin and forced him to the ground. I should have known you were hiding something like that. He jostled Frankie off the hoverboard. He tumbled onto the stack. Frankie tumbled onto the stack of bicycles. Pain wrenched through his elbow and up his arm and neck. Ow! Ogwa sniggered. You can teach me how to use this. Will it get us across the ocean? No, his face flushed. It needs charging. How much battery time does it have? It only lasts 6 hours. Damn, I should have known you'd try to escape. Frankie balled his fists. What do you expect? You said you'll sell me as a slave. You wouldn't want to escape after who wouldn't want to escape after watching you murder Zarita without a second thought? Ogwa's face turned beetroot red. He glanced at the woman. Anyway, she said, I better go wash up more dishes before they fill up the entire kitchen. She pasted on a fake smile and left. When she opened the door, a waft of steam puffed out with music and raucous conversation. Can 2 people ride on this? Not 2 adults. You're too big and heavy. Frankie showed him how to use the hoverboard and demonstrated how to fold and unfold the device. After they returned to the bar, Ogwa smiled broadly. It was the first time Frankie had seen the man not frowning. Here, Ogwa shoved a third pint of spiced cider towards Frankie. You deserve this. What? For my freedom? Nah. Then why? For this. He held out the square of hoverboard, then pulled out a rectangular piece of paper from his other pocket. And for this. What's that? A ticket for the next ferry to Osbox. Where's mine? You ain't got one. You'll be staying here for the rest of your life. Meet the landlord, Billy. The Mayleedian man who Ogwa had been conversing with waved at Frankie. You'll be living and working here from now on, boy. Frankie's ribcage tightened. No need to look so worried. Billy guffawed. You'll be the new kitchen boy, not a diamond miner or chimney sweep. Frankie slanted his body away from the men and guzzled his pint. If Ogwa wasn't 2 times bigger, he'd punch him and glean back his hoverboard. After Ogwa bid a drunk Frankie farewell, Billy curled an arm around him and showed him to his room upstairs. Don't work tonight, start tomorrow. After the man with the afro left, there was a light knock at the door. He opened it and his breath caught in his lungs when coming face to face with the pretty server. Can I come in? She was carrying something. He nodded and stepped back. After shutting the door, she lowered Olio onto the wooden floorboards. I don't need to say wooden. Let's just say onto the floorboards. The sparry cat barked and pounced before plopping his butt down and scratching his outer thigh excitedly. Frankie dropped to a squat and pampered the animal. "Is he allowed here?" "Yes, my uncle said it's fine, as long as he doesn't do any dirties inside. Can you train him to do his business above the pigsty? That toilet everyone uses?" "Yes, I guess so." "You better show him now before he sleeps. I'll bring him a bowl of water and he can borrow my rug." Frankie stood and touched her hand. "Thank you." She withdrew, embarrassed. Frankie stammered, "What's your name?" "Rebecca." "Thank you, Rebecca. You know your way around, right?" "I know where the pigsty bog is." "Well, I'll wake you bright and early in the morning for breakfast." "Okay, I'm afraid you'll have to clean that pigsty bog in the morning." "The top or the bottom?" Her face soured. "Sorry, you'll be digging all the feces out and loading it onto the cart." The end.